Hello, I'm Richard Raffan and I'm going to make a little pencil pot out of a piece of claret ash. So we're using a Vic Mark chuck with shark jaws. It's just under 70mm square, and so that will fit right in for the moment, and turn one end, get it round and then reverse it in the chuck. So mostly with these short blanks I like to use a bowl gouge, and it's a strong, nice strong tool, and does the job nice and quickly. Across the end grain, I really prefer using a 3/8 spindle gouge on the places where you practice these cuts. This will be the base, so I want to make sure it's flat. So it's not completely, or a little bit of chip out there from the grain, which was not quite straight. That'll go back into the chuck now, but because it's flat here, then it will sit square in the bottom of the chuck. So just using the wing of the tool. And like to have the rest across at a bit of an angle, and I'm doing this tool right on its side as I get into the wood, then rotate slightly anti-clockwise and off to the middle, back onto its side at centre. Just kind of habit, make sure it's all slightly concave, flat to slightly concave, so if you need to turn it round it does go into the chuck all right. Right, little flat bits here. In fact, I think I'll have this as the base, so I'm just going to true this up, and I'll skim it up using the skew flat on the rest. It's rather like a negative rate scraper. It's not something I normally can be bothered with, but that just gets the bottom that bit smooth. And I'm also going to put a little shoulder just up here, so that helps me get it aligned in the chuck. So now this little shoulder, I can have the jaws going onto that. Now the jaws are digging in. You don't really need the serrations in these jaws. The bit which grips are the corners of the teeth digging in. So I've got a good grip there, but those are also marks which I'm going to have to get rid of later. Little bit of chipped out grain here indicates it really doesn't like being shear cut, so I'm just going to use a peeling cut for that. Take that off. Right, that's smooth. Go more gently with a shear cut. Yeah, that's okay. Coming in on the rim. Now to drill the depth, I'm going to use a depth drill, but to get the starting point, use the skew on its side, just make a little cone. And then that means that with the depth drill, got a couple of bevels, and basically going to bring the bevel up to rub and then push the tool in. Now I've got bought a black drill, so that any marks I make on it are nice and silver coming through. So I'm going to go in to that one. Now if this doesn't go in straight, you'll know all about it. The thing will be going round and round in your hand, and it's not very comfortable. So that tells me how far to go. Now, normally I use a back hollowing, which I'm going to put in a separate video, but this will For most people who are just doing these for the first time, suggest using a square end scraper. This is a 3/4 of an inch rather, square end scraper, only it's not square, it's very slightly radius that way. And this, the top of the tool's being ground just here. This had a little radius up the edge, which meant I didn't have a really sharp corner. But now I'm going to come in at a slight angle to open this up. Now I can push that in from the side. Now I need to know how deep I'm going, and I've got some little rare earth magnets here, and I'll just remind myself of the depth, which was just short of that mark. So right, so that will tell me, warn me when I'm getting near the bottom. I've also got sound to help me, and the other thing which it pays to do here is to try and get the tool post underneath the tool, so there's any vibration there is, even on these very good strong rests, there's still a little bit of vibration out on the end, so always better to work near the middle. So this time let's get it feeded in. I'm holding the tool near the ferrule so that the handle's up against my forearm. You can't see what's going on inside, so don't bother to look. So basically it's a feel thing. You can feel when you're going, when you get the tool just right, it'll bore in. And the further you come away from the centre, the less of the edge you use. So I'm going to be using about probably about 4 to 5 millimeters only at the moment. And even that seems a bit much, so I just ease it slightly towards centre. The note tells me, the change in the pitch tells me I'm getting near the bottom. I can drag the tool back and I can feel where there's a shoulder. It's quite noisy. But the advantage of doing this with a square end scraper is that you don't have a little hole in the centre, which you would if you're doing it with a Forstner bit. So across the bottom there's a little bit of torn grain. Now I'm going to show you how you deal with this so you can see what's happening once I've completed the box. But for the moment I'm going to have to tell you about it. I drop the handle to bring the edge up through the centre, and then I use the left wing of the tool, the left corner rather, and just drag that sideways. And that should give me a clean surface. But if you kind of reach down there and peer in, you'll probably, if you have a little catch, you'll get a clip around the ear. And if it's bad enough, you'll get blood as well. So it's a feely thing rather than a looky thing. Drop the handle to bring the edge, the centre of the edge, which has a slight radius so you can't get the corners stuck in on the end grain. And then I'm going to tilt the tool around, so just get the corner into the wood and drag it across the bottom. And you'll actually see that happening in a minute. Right, so that's the inside done, and to sand that out usually use 120 grit to start with, because you've got the corner of the tool going into end grain, it's likely to tear a bit. Across the bottom is normally clean enough cut that you don't need to do very much sanding. If you do, just turn the end up and stick it in. Sand the inner lip and the outer one just because it's a bit safer to do that. This is the yellow 180 grit. See how we're going? Not too bad. A bit of the blue, which is the 240 grit. And it always gets folded with the warp, with the cloth, so with the numbers, and that way it stays folded, it doesn't try and unwrap, unroll. Right, so that's the inside. And now I'm going to start to do the outside, and I also need to measure the depth. So that's down just inside the jaws. Now you measure the exact depth so that you know where the inside is. That's the most important thing. And I've also just hollowed it back a little bit so it's slightly wider inside than at the rim. I'd like to have a little kind of bead or something up here, so I'll put the V-groove in, and I'm going to use the peeling cuts here it's sounding a bit thinner than I was expecting. So having established that diameter, now I can come in and use a shear cut. Up to the bottom of that V-groove, so I've now got a little rim around the top. Just a little bit more. I'm doing this now for two reasons. One, so I can feel what's happening. Feel the wall thickness, need some more light. And also I know that this is all going to be running through. So that's that done. Now, next thing is to shift it out from the chuck. So I know where the bottom is, which is where that pencil line is. I've got that little ridge which I put in before, which should help me get the thing running true. So it's just very lightly held, and I just need to knock it over. Watch where it's furthest away on the back, and then pull it towards me a bit. That's running pretty well true enough. So the next thing is, now I know this is the inside, and I can still check that. Yep, so that's spot on. Now I can make a little cut with a parting tool when I find it. This is a D-way parting tool, very nice narrow one. And I'm going to work right up against the chuck. So I'm going to allow about 6-7 mil in the bottom thickness. But the main thing here is that's my parting cut, that's where the bottom is going to be. Now I can finish everything up to there. And when I come to part off, all I have to do is put the parting tool in the same place and carry on to the bottom. That's sounding rather thinner than is ideal in there. It's probably 4 mil thick or so. And a little bit of vibration there, so there'd be very slight run up, but not enough to worry about. So that outside can be sanded. use the yellow again, which is the 180 grit. Some of these boxes I'm painting, so I'm not necessarily going to put a finish on this one. There we go. No, I'll just leave that one plain so I can decorate it later. I need to part this off and then make a chuck so I can turn off the bottom. So the parting cuts are made with the tool just below the surface. It goes out and then down towards the centre. And then we need a little chuck for it, which I could use with that, but just before I do that I'll actually show you what I was doing when I was hollowing the end grain. So the way to practice finishing the bottom when you can't see anything, imagine this is here, all I've done is taking away the box part, so I'm just going to turn that. So this is what I was doing when you couldn't see. So the tool rested a fair way back, as you can see. So to get rid of that little centre nub, are you going to fix the camera? Get rid of that little central nub. What you need to do is just drop the handle, and so the tool comes up to the edge. But typically what happens is if you're hollowing here, you're going into the middle, and by dropping the handle that eases the tool forward with a kind of scooping action. You can actually start to hollow down into the wood a bit. Now to smooth all that, come up through the centre, and then you move the left corner across the end grain. Little lump in the middle. That's all you need to do is just drop the handle very slightly, and that'll pivot the edge into the wood. Because there's a slight curve on this, slight radius on the end, you can't get both corners into the wood at once unless you've got a concave. And dragging the corner across, do it again. So this is how you can practice this, when you can see what you're doing. And then when you get the hang of it, you just look elsewhere. Or if you've got somebody watching you, you can look at them watching you. And that will give you a reasonably clean surface. But this is a lousy bit of wood, it turns out. So not the ideal bit to demonstrate on. Let's have another go at it. Just have to move more accurately with the... I don't think this is the claret ash I thought it was. It's the desert ash, which is nothing like so good to work. Let's see if that's any better. Yeah, it's getting there. But it's not an easy bit of wood to work. I have one more go and then that's it. Right, it's sandable. Not ideal, but normally I'd probably avoid that wood in future. You can see how bad it can tear up on the edge. Right, now to make a chuck to turn the bottom off. So I have this other bit of wood here. This is always pays to start again. Here's another bit of wood to use for a chuck. Always pays to keep these little odd lumps, offcuts from other jobs, and I've put a little shoulder on it so that will fit into there and be running pretty well true, and this is probably the tail end of another box. So here let's see how you make a jam chuck. Basically, screw this up first, and also true up the end grain, at least the rim. Now engage by eye where the inside is, so I'm going to cut steep bevel, and I want the end just to fit over that. Doesn't do that yet, so down to a cylinder, so it still doesn't fit. Then tilt that again, hold it on very gently. In fact, there's no finish on the inside, so it's inclined to snatch, or if not burn. So just going to get a little burnish mark. I can see roughly where it fits, and I come down onto that burnish mark. So now I'm thinking in terms of about half a degree. Just want it very slightly fatter at the back, and that goes on, and pop that on. Now, because I've sanded the inside, the chances are the narrowest bit is actually about ½ an inch down, which is the case here, so I need a slightly longer flange. That was a bit of a catch, if anything. I just went a shade too hard. Definitely a shade too hard, but that doesn't matter because I can come further down here. It's so tempting just to whack that on, but if you do that, it's likely to split because the grain's running parallel up the sides and it's comparatively weak. So a little bit more off there. It's more accurate to turn it than sand it, and what I want is to have this rim up against that shoulder. Right, so then that's on tight and I know it's running true. I also know that this doesn't want to cut very cleanly, so it probably looks as rough as anything out here. Hadn't really looked. Yes, could be a lot better. So try that first with the 3/8 spindle gouge. So this is right on its side. Once I'm in the wood, rotate it slightly anti-clockwise. The wood's moving slower the nearer centre you get, so just got to slow up the speed of the cut as you come into centre. On its side at the end, so the nose of the tool goes across centre. And just see what that looks like. Right, better than the inside, that's a relief. So that's going to be, if I want any detail on there, any kind of decoration, I can use the skew long point tool on its side, have a little groove. Or if I want to recess it at all, then I can use the short corner and just ease that in. And that doesn't sound as if it's cutting very cleanly, so do that. And with any shape which is kind of tapering as it comes out. That means you've got a very sharp corner here which is likely to get chipped. So just put a little chamfer on that, little half V cut on that, copes with that, and then just sand it off. And why it's not connected, that's why it's not extracting. And the 240. Right, so that doesn't want to come off that easily. So. Right, and there's another little pot. And the tools involved were a parting tool, scraper, and a skew chisel. And as I picked the piece up, as I got it off the chuck, I heard a little crack and it did split. So you get an opportunity to look at the cross section on this occasion. So it was going to be a bit of a disaster from the start by the look of it, but anyway, always instructional, these things. And I could even now resurrect this, and I could flatten that surface off, and then you can stick it on a backing and hang it on the wall, and it's a good little kind of pencil box on the wall. In fact, you've got two of them.